This is ASMR agus inniu. I have a map here of the greater Boston area. This map is from the New York Times, part of a series called The Fingerprints of History. And today I thought I could take my wand and point to different sections of the map and explain the city of Boston's geography and layout. I am from the greater Boston area. I have lived here my entire life, and I went to college here, and now I work here, and so I feel pretty confident that I know this area pretty well. But this is a very special map. It was given to me by my grandfather, and each of these small black dots on the map signifies a different building, a different building, a different building, different building, different building. And so the map has the historical layout of the city of Boston shown through its architecture and urban planning. So I will take you on a tour of the greater Boston area through the fingerprints of history today. Greater Boston. This section right here gives a little blurb that describes what the purpose of this map is, and it says, "In this map, Greater Boston clearly shows its centuries of development. The city hugs the coastline, and the tiny core from the 1600s darkens the map in its built-up density. That dark splotch is a close approximation of the original Shawmut Peninsula that early Bostonians settled. As the city's population grew beyond its ability to build on reclaimed land, the city spilled out into streetcar suburbs like Dorchester, Somerville, and Brookline. Keep an eye out for the openness of Franklin Park, and imagine how liberating it must have once been for cramped city dwellers to step off the trolley into such a place. Do you see the buildings packed in near the railway line at Dorchester, going slightly more gray beyond that built-up hub, the curving swirls of streets flowing around Brookline? It's all-hearted to discern today as the expanding city filled in around them, but the fingerprints of history are there. The fingerprints of history are there. So let's start our tour in the Boston Harbor right here. This is the Boston Harbor, and it is enclosed by the Deer Island Peninsula right here in the city of Winthrop, which is separate from Boston, and the town of Hull right here. And if you have ever been to Hull, here's Hull High School, you would be able to see the entire city of Boston laid out before you across the harbor. Now in the Boston Harbor we have a bunch of famous islands. Let's imagine we're taking a ferry from Hull all the way to downtown Boston. First, you'd leave from Hull Point and Peddex Island right here. This is where Shutter Island was filmed, the movie Shutter Island. Then you pass George's Island right here, which has a famous fort on it. Past Long Island right here, Deer Island, Spectacle, Thompson, and I believe this is Lovell's Island. Street goes through the center of Deer Island and Long Island, down this crease, and in to downtown Boston. You would see Logan Airport, a big flat stretch of land before you, as well as Fort Independence on Castle Island in South Boston right here. And you would pull in to Long Wharf in the north end. Long Wharf is around here. This is the historic wharf of trading in Boston. If you go back to the 1700s, they also had Long Wharf there. Now let's look at what is called Shawmut Peninsula. Shawmut Peninsula. So the city of Boston used to be a peninsula. Right here, this big head used to be the head of the peninsula, and then there was a neck right here, and the neighborhoods of the city of Boston downtown are laid out in such a way that they would refer to the different parts of the Shawmut Peninsula. So the north end is the north end of the Shawmut Peninsula. The west end is the west end of the Shawmut Peninsula. The south end is the south end of the Shawmut Peninsula. And the financial district and downtown crossing and Chinatown right here. There is no east end of Boston. There is, however, East Boston. One thing that is confusing about Boston is it has North End, West End, and South End, but also South Boston and East Boston. Even though South Boston is north of most of the city, and East Boston is north of most of the rest of the city. So they're not really accurate descriptors of their locations. So in the North End, those that have been to Boston know that the North End is the center of Italian American heritage in the city of Boston. And historically, there was a highway here in this line. This open line here was known as the artery, and it was a raised highway that brought you from the Mass Pike into the downtown of Boston. But it was like many cities in American cities in the 1950s and 60s. It did more harm than good because it tore apart neighborhoods and separated different parts of the city from other parts of the city. So the North End became isolated from the rest of the city. Now in the 90s and early 2000s, they decided to tear down this highway and bury it underground in what's known as the Big Dig. And those who know the history of Boston know that the Big Dig was one of the most expensive projects in U.S. history. Billions and billions of dollars spent just burying this highway underground. If it were me, I would just tear down the highway and not build anything underground. Because this is the downtown of the city. And Boston is the most walkable city in the country, in the United States. So you just do not need a car to get anywhere. So I wonder why they built that highway underground. But anyway, they replaced the highway with a park called the Rose Kennedy Greenway, named after the mother of John F. Kennedy, Rose Kennedy. So that is the North End. And across from the North End right here is the West End. This used to be a bustling urban neighborhood. And then in the 1960s, they tore the whole neighborhood exists anymore because it's so small and disconnected from the rest of the downtown. But this is where Mass General Hospital is. And then across from the West End is Beacon Hill. Beacon Hill is historically an African American neighborhood. It is the home, and by historically I mean the 1700s and 1800s, not the 1900s. In the 1700s and 1800s, Beacon Hill was the home of Boston's African American community, and it was a lot of freed people and home of the abolition movement in the city. And you can still take a tour of Boston's historic African American history through Beacon Hill, where you can learn about the Underground Railroad and the first public school for African American people in, I believe, the United States, although I could be wrong. It's a very, very amazing tour, and it starts in the Boston Common right here at the General Shaw Memorial. The General Shaw Memorial commemorates, I forget the number of the 59th or the 39th Regiment of the Civil War, which was an all-black regiment from Massachusetts that fought in the Civil War, led by General Shaw. And so you have Beacon Hill, which is slowly became one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in the city through gentrification and whatnot, and became kind of picturesque, like the symbol of kind of old colonial Boston because it's so well preserved. But it has such a fascinating history, and a history related to Black liberation. And so we have the Boston Common right here, and the Boston Common is separated into the actual Boston Common, and then the public garden in the just to the southwest of it right here is this like little square that's the public garden. And you can see the road that crosses it, sort of. The public garden is managed separately from the Boston Common. And then on this side of the Common we have the Theater District and Chinatown right here, and the Financial District and Downtown Crossing. And then I believe over here this is known as Bay Village, but I could be wrong. Alright, and then you can see the way that the Mass Pike comes in here and separates the city off right here and then goes around. So that's the majority of the Shawmut Peninsula. And then to the south of the Mass Pike we have the South End right here. And the South End is a mix of very historic Victorian homes and newer developments and whatnot. And it's also a neighborhood that has been gentrified pretty heavily. It was the home of the LGBTQ community in the early 2000s, but even they have largely been pushed out of the neighborhood. On the opposite side of here we have the Back Bay, and the Back Bay is centered around Commonwealth Avenue, which leaves the Boston Common and the public gardens and stretches all the way out here. This is Commonwealth Avenue. Right? Commonwealth Avenue. So Back Bay and this part of the South End are both built on landfill. That's what it meant by spilling out on reclaimed land somewhere up in here. Spilled out industry. Its ability to build on reclaimed land. The city is built out into streetcar suburbs. So Back Bay is reclaimed land. South End is largely reclaimed land. And yes, so once we have Back Bay and South End are separated by what's known as the High Spine. The High Spine is the neck of the Shawmut Peninsula, and I believe that there was a superstition that building giant skyscrapers on reclaimed land would cause them to sink into the ground because they were too heavy for the reclaimed land, because much of Back Bay and South End are, like, if you go down underground, it's what's the word? Swamp that's been filled in. So it's very unstable. And so they believed that building massive skyscrapers like the Prudential Center and Hancock Tower, Hancock Building, and whatnot would sink into the ground. And so they built all of the skyscrapers on the neck of the Shawmut Peninsula. And it became known as the High Spine in architectural circles. If you walk around Boston, you're like, oh look, there's the High Spine. People will be like, what are you talking about? Nobody calls it that, except in architectural circles. And I know that because I took classes on it. So we have the South End in Back Bay. To the east of downtown, we have the Seaport District. And you can see this is very sparsely developed right now. But it is the home of most of the development that is happening in the city of Boston currently. Now, people in Boston politics would have you call this the South Boston waterfront because it is attached to South Boston right here. And local politicians divide up their jurisdictions to include the Seaport District and South Boston. But walking around Boston, you would probably call this the Seaport District. Or if they're older, you might call it Fisherman's Wharf, which is a very old name for this area of the city. And right here is Four Point Channel, which is a very historic packing district, very beautiful buildings right here, very small neighborhood. And then the rest of the Seaport District, which is a lot of parking lots and shipping areas that are being turned into office buildings. But they can only build to half the height of normal skyscrapers because Logan Airport is right across the water and they don't want planes hitting buildings. So there's a height cap in the city of Boston. You could only build so high. South of the Seaport District, we have South Boston, which is the home of the Irish American community in the city of Boston. And in my opinion, the actual Irish community, so there's the Irish American community here, which are descendants of Irish people who emigrated to Boston in the 1800s. And then there's the Irish community, which are descendants of Irish people that emigrated to Boston in the 1900s and 2000s. And a lot of them live in Dorchester, in places like Adams Corner, or in Quincy or Milton. So two different ethnic groups almost. Right, so South Boston right here, and Fort Independence or Castle Island right here. And this is a very popular running destination. If you're ever in this area, there's a hot dog restaurant called Sully's. So just south of South Boston is Dorchester. Dorchester is quite a massive neighborhood. It's all of this, and it includes various smaller neighborhoods within it, including Upham's Corner, Nubium Square, which used to be called Dudley Square. You have Columbia Point right here. You have Mattapan, south of Dorchester. And then going south, you have Roslindale and Hyde Park and West Roxbury over here somewhere. I'm not too familiar with this part of the city. It's largely residential, and it's very difficult to get there from the rest of the city, where you can take a bus or a train to get downtown, but you can't take one across. So, to the west of the city, you have Brookline, which is its own town, and it intersects. The tip of Brookline is in the Fens at Fenway, which is part of the city of Boston. And you can see Fenway Park right here. And then to the west of Brookline is Brighton. This is Brighton right here. And Allston. So this area is called Allston Brighton. And you can see Commonwealth Avenue going through Allston Brighton right here. This line, this curvy line, and this is the Green Line, the B branch of the Green Line. And then you have Beacon Street, which is the C branch. And then you have Reservoir on the D branch right here, I believe. And they all meet at Kenmore Square near Fenway Park. Now, west of that, you have the Chestnut Hill Reservoir and the rest of Chestnut Hill, which is all part of Newton. So Newton and Brighton intersect right here. And you can see the Charles River right here flowing. The Charles River, Charles River, Charles River. And then north of the Charles River is Cambridge, which is famous for its universities like Harvard and MIT. And then Somerville, which is its own city. So Cambridge and Somerville are two separate cities north of Boston. And then Medford right here. And then up here are what is known as the gateway cities. So you have Charlestown and East Boston, which are both neighborhoods of Boston. So the city of Boston kind of comes up like this, then goes up like this, and around. But then you have Chelsea, Everett, and Revere, which are all separate cities, separated from Boston. They're separate cities, defined by their relationship to the Mystic River. So you have the Charles River, and then you have the Mystic River, which doesn't really touch Boston all that much except for Charlestown and East Boston, but is as much a part of the greater Boston area as the Charles River. Right? So north of the city you have the North Shore. This is the North Shore, and this is where you can find Salem, Massachusetts. Salem, Massachusetts. And the Middlesex Fells Reservation, which is an area, a hiking area in the Middlesex County. Very beautiful hiking area. I've been there many times. And then to the south of the city, you have the Blue Hills Reservation, which is another hiking area. So now let's loop around. So we did the north of the city and the west of the city with Newton and Needham, but we haven't touched the south of the city. This large expanse right here. So we have the Blue Hills Reservation, Quincy, Milton, Hingham right here. This is Hingham. But the actual downtown, I think, is over here. And then this area is called World's End. And this is actually where Boston offered the United Nations headquarters in their pitch to be, it would have been right here. And what a strange thing that would have been, to have the United Nations in the city of Boston, or near the city of Boston, at least, because it's still pretty far from the actual city. Remember how we took that ferry from Hull? This is about a 25-minute ferry ride. So imagine being at World's End, but now it's a really nice farm. So we have, south of the city, we have the South Shore, which is made up of Hingham and Cohasset and Norwell and Scituate and Marshfield to the south. Blue Hills Reservation. So that makes up the most of the greater Boston area. You can see the entirety of the greater Boston area here. And we covered the Shawmut Peninsula downtown to Cambridge and Somerville, to the north of the city, west of the city, south of the city. And of course you can't really do east of the city because that's the Boston Harbor Islands and the Atlantic Ocean and Massachusetts Bay. But if you carried out to the east, you would eventually reach Cape Cod and Provincetown, Massachusetts. So yes, thank you for watching this ASMR video. I've really enjoyed making it. Boston has been my home for my entire life. If you would like to see more videos about cities and maps and historic items, please let me know. As always, I appreciate liking the video and subscribing to my channel, and your comments are really impactful. They are what makes this endeavor worthwhile. Every comment I receive, I really appreciate, and I decide to make another video. Immediately from reading that comment, I'm like, well, I need to make another video now. So, I love listening to your comments. And welcome to all my new subscribers as well. We had 20 subscribers last week, and now we have over 40 this week. So, hopefully that will continue to grow. As we say in Irish, because this is ASMR Tríocht, and Tríocht is the Irish word for magic, we say Slán agus Beannacht, Slán agus Beannacht, health and blessings to you, Slán leat agus Beannacht, health and blessings to you all. I will see you in the next video.